Today, we're diving into one of the biggest stories ever told. It's the story of life itself. We're going to trace this incredible journey all the way from a single spark in a primordial ocean to the amazing, wild, and diverse world we see all around us. This is the complete story of evolution.
So, let's start with the two biggest questions, right? First, how in the world did life even begin on a planet that was once just a barren rock? And second, how did we get from those first simple organisms to, well, us? To figure this out, we've got to go back. Way, way back.
All right, here's our roadmap. We'll start at the very beginning, the chemical spark of life. Then we're going to put on our detective hats and look at the clues evolution left behind. We'll get into Darwin's world-changing idea, see how modern genetics filled in the gaps, and then watch evolution happen in real time. Finally, we'll trace our own incredible family story.
Okay, let's kick things off. Our story actually starts not on Earth, but in the chaos of the early universe. Because, to really get life, you have to understand the stage it was born on.
The time frame we're talking about here is just mind-bending. The universe kicks off with the Big Bang about 13.8 billion years ago. Our Earth doesn't even show up until way later, around 4.5 billion years ago. And then, check this out, only about 500 million years after that, boom, the first hints of life appear. It was a long, slow road from there. We're talking about simple, self-copying molecules, maybe like RNA showing up 3 billion years ago. And true cells, with an actual structure, those didn't get going until about 2 billion years ago.
So how did that first spark even happen? Well, the leading idea is something called chemical evolution. And it's a pretty wild thought. Life didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was a gradual process built step by step from non-living stuff, organic molecules like proteins and RNA that were already forming on a young Earth.
Just try to imagine the early Earth for a second. It was a crazy, violent place. We're talking scorching hot temperatures, constant volcanic storms, and an atmosphere that would be totally toxic to us. It was what we call a reducing atmosphere, full of things like methane and ammonia. But here's the key part. There was no free oxygen. And that's absolutely crucial, because oxygen would have just destroyed these delicate new molecules. This harsh, messy planet was actually the perfect kitchen for cooking up life.
Now, this wasn't just some wild guess. Back in 1953, two scientists, Miller and Urey, decided to test it. They basically built a little model of early Earth in a flask. They filled it with the right gases, methane, ammonia, water, and then they zapped it with electric sparks, just like lightning. And the result? It was incredible. They had created amino acids, the building blocks of proteins, from scratch. It was the first solid proof that the ingredients for life could come from non-life.
So, life got started, but how do we know for sure that it all evolved from a common ancestor into the millions of species we see today? Well, this is where we become detectives, piecing together the evidence life has left scattered around for us to find.
The evidence for evolution is just overwhelming, and it comes from all over the place. This table is a great summary, and definitely something to keep in mind for your exams. First up, homologous structures. Look at your hand, then think about a whale's flipper. They look different and do different jobs, right? But inside, the bone structure is pretty much the same. That's a huge clue that we share a common ancestor. On the flip side, you have analogous structures, like a bird's wing and a butterfly's wing. They both do the same thing, flying, but they evolved completely separately. Then, of course, there are fossils, which are like a direct history book written in rock. Embryology shows us that early on, different embryos, like fish, birds, and humans, look shockingly similar. And finally, the ultimate proof is in our DNA. The fact that basically all life on Earth uses the same genetic code is pretty much the smoking gun for a single origin.
And now we get to the guy who put it all together, Charles Darwin. His trip around the world on the HMS Beagle wasn't just some adventure. It was a journey that was about to change how we see life forever.
Darwin's brilliant idea was a process he called natural selection. It's actually pretty simple when you break it down. First, he noticed that in any group of animals or plants, there's always variation. No two are exactly alike. Second, because there aren't enough resources to go around, there's a constant struggle for existence. That leads to his most famous point, survival of the fittest. But listen, fittest doesn't mean the strongest or the fastest. It just means the one that fits best in its environment. Those individuals with traits that give them an edge are more likely to survive and have kids. And finally, this is the real engine of change. Those winning traits get passed on. Generation after generation, the whole population slowly changes.
Now, Darwin knew his theory was right, but he had a huge missing piece. He didn't know why there was variation or how traits were passed down. That's where modern science steps in. This is the story of how Darwin's big idea got a major upgrade with the science of genetics.
So, where does all this super important variation come from? There are 4 main sources. First, you've got mutation. Think of it like a typo in the genetic code. It's totally random, but it can create brand new traits. Then there's genetic recombination. This is like shuffling a deck of cards every time a new organism is made. It just mixes up existing genes into new combos. Next is gene flow. This happens when animals or plants move from one population to another, bringing their genes with them. And finally, there's genetic drift. This is just pure chance. Sometimes random luck can make a trait more common, especially in a small population.
To prove that evolution is happening, scientists came up with a pretty clever idea. They asked, what would a population look like if evolution stopped? And that's the Hardy-Weinberg principle. It's basically a scientific baseline, a mathematical model of a population that's in perfect genetic equilibrium, where absolutely nothing changes. It's a snapshot of a world with no evolution.
So what would it take to actually stop evolution in its tracks? Well, you'd need these 5 impossible conditions. You'd need 0 mutations, no one moving in or out, a population so big it's basically infinite, completely random mating, and 0 natural selection. As you can probably guess, this perfect state of equilibrium never ever happens in nature. And that's the whole point. Because these 5 things are never true, it means evolution is always happening. It's the default setting for life. So definitely remember these 5 points for your exam.
Okay, enough with the theory. We've talked about the history and the mechanics. Now let's look at some real-world examples and see this whole thing in action.
A really cool example of evolution in action is adaptive radiation. This is when one single species arrives in a new place and then explodes into a bunch of different species, each one perfectly suited for a different job. The classic case study is, of course, Darwin's finches in the Galapagos Islands. One type of finch got there, and over time its descendants evolved into many different species, each with a unique beak shape for a specific food, some for crushing seeds, some for catching insects, others for eating fruit. It's a perfect little miniature of how natural selection creates diversity.
Now let's zoom out and look at the big picture history of life. About 500 million years ago, the oceans were full of invertebrates. Then, around 350 million years ago, the first fish show up, and life starts to move onto land. That sets the stage for the age of reptiles, which kicked off 200 million years ago with the dinosaurs ruling the planet. Their long reign came to a crashing end 65 million years ago, which opened up a huge opportunity for a new group to take over, the mammals.
And that brings us to the most recent chapter in this story. And from our point of view, it's the most interesting one. Let's turn the focus on ourselves and trace the incredible journey of human evolution. Our story starts with ancestors that we share with modern apes. If you go back about 15 million years, you find primates like Dryopithecus, which was more ape-like, and Ramapithecus, which was a bit more human-like. They were the starting point from which our own special lineage began its journey.
From those early primates, our family tree really started to grow. Just look at this timeline. Around 2 million years ago, we see Homo habilis, nicknamed Handyman because he was the first to consistently make and use stone tools. He was followed by Homo erectus about 1.5 million years ago, a really important ancestor who learned to control fire and was the first to walk fully upright. After a bunch of other branches on the family tree, our own species, Homo sapiens, finally arrived and began to spread across the entire planet.
So let's wrap this all up. We've seen how life could have started from simple chemistry on a young planet. We've looked at the clues hidden in fossils and in our own DNA. We've unpacked Darwin's elegant idea of natural selection, and we've seen how modern genetics made it even more powerful. We've journeyed through the entire epic history of life.
At the end of the day, evolution isn't just a topic in a textbook. It's the one big idea that explains the stunning diversity of all life on this planet, from the tiniest microbe to the biggest blue whale. It's the story of where everything came from, including us. Hey, if you found this helpful, please give it a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.